It's nice to be back with all of you. Those of you who keep track of these things know that I've been gone for about 6 weeks, and I'm back here for 4 weeks, gone for 6 again, then back for 8, gone for 6. So it's going to be a lot of coming and going now. I'm carrying on what Swamiji actually asked me to do 10 years ago, just in the last year of his life, which was to travel as much as I can and to carry his teachings to anyone who will listen. So I was in Europe, I'm going to India, and then in the spring I'm going to the Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa, all meeting with Ananda devotees in all those places to share with them the unique experience that I've had of being personally instructed by Swamiji and doing my best to pass that on. Even though it's a big change, in January of this year, I will have been living here for 36 years, which is rather a long time. And so it's a bit different for me. I'm feeling that it's the right thing, but of course coming back here, I remember why I've lived here for so long, with so many wonderful friends and so on. But that's just my little report. I wanted to not ignore the fact that everything is very different for me right now. What we're talking about today, which is what does it mean to fail spiritually, and we start with that horrific tale of those virgins. I think because I tend to do the first Sunday service in December, I always get this reading. And I always stand up and tell you what a horrific tale it is. But I have to admit that this time, listening to it, the divine justice of Jesus' parable seemed more obvious to me. I don't know if that's a softening or a hardening of my heart. I'm not sure which way. In my recent travels, going to several countries, 5 countries in Europe, which I've never traveled like that in Europe before. I've always gone on holiday. I was struck by the consistency of the experience I was having, which is not different than what happens in the USA. It's just it was intensified because every single day I was in contact with devotees in a question and answer way, almost always. And I think the word is horrified, to realize the extent to which we, as human beings, are insecure in our relationship with the divine. And it's about the gradual shift where a master comes and brings us a revelation, and a great saint comes, and they tell us over and over again that we are children of the divine, loved by our infinite parents. And we use words and images that we're familiar with in an effort to open the doorway to something that we literally cannot imagine. So the ideal of parental love, it's more often expressed as mother love, because the feminine is compassionate and forgiving, whereas the father often sets a standard that the child is expected to meet. But nonetheless, parental love is the most irrefutable kind of love that there is. It is based in the human world upon the physical relationship. We have one mother, we have one father, because we have one body. And so in that sense, it's finite, but the experience of it, starting from childhood, is of this unconditional force that simply accepts us. On Friday night, our high school put on a showcase of, there were like, I think 15 or so students, maybe a few more, and they've been working in their performing arts class to do these 1-minute shows, or one-person shows, 1 to 5 minutes, on a wide variety of themes. It was filmed. If you didn't see it, it was really impressive to watch what those children, what those adolescents were able to put forward. And one of the girls spoke about motherhood. And I found out later from Keshava, her teacher, maybe it was on the program, but the print was too small and I didn't have my glasses, so I couldn't read it. But she sat and she talked about the experience that was actually her own birth. She interviewed her own mother and asked her mother to tell her about what it was like when you were born, and then she sat and gave a monologue that was actually her mother's voice. Keshava said later she was actually wearing her mother's clothes. And she was a teenager. She looked like a full-grown woman. It was so touching. She carried it off just perfectly. And she, speaking as her mother to her daughter, when you were born, when you came, when I held you in my arms. And the teenager just completely captured what that feeling was. The perfection of the baby, the realization of the relationship. Because, of course, once the baby is born, as long as that child lives, the mother, it's always the mother's child. It's just, and the same with the father, of course, but she was talking from the mother's point of view. So whether we had that kind of love or whether we had the absence of that kind of love, the heart knows. The heart knows that this is what I was born to experience. I've always really loved seeing little children and just traveling all over, seeing little children. There's so many moments where the poignancy of being loved is so intense. Somewhere on the street of either Amsterdam or London, there was this little baby carriage like that, and it was cold, so the children were all bundled up, and this child is all bundled up, and right next to him you can see, just coming out from under the covers, the head of the duck, the little stuffed duck. So he's all bundled in with his little stuffed duck, and now he feels completely safe. And you can see in a heartbeat how much sensitivity and love was expressed by that mother, knowing the duck was needed and had to be under the covers, and just all of that. And Swamiji made this statement, which is so extraordinary to contemplate, that because our real destiny is to return to our divine self, to be reunited with the infinite, and that this world that we live in, which seems so perfectly self-consistent and we exist in it, it's a classroom. We think of it as life itself. And within life, we build in little classrooms, but we know what a classroom is. Classroom is a place where I stay for a time in order to learn things that I don't know, that I need to learn in order to have a fulfilling experience of my own existence. But because the time span of this classroom is so long, and because there's this consistency, we just lose touch with the fact that this is only a classroom. And we lose touch with what the meaning of our experiences actually are, what the experiences are meant to teach us. And so Swami made the statement that everything in the material world is a symbol of the greater reality of the infinity to which we belong. And so what is so fundamental to human life is the mother and father relationship. We can't exist. We don't take incarnation unless a mother and father participate in the creation of the vehicle. Swami gave this advice to parents once that is so perfect. He was, when asked, what is the proper attitude to have towards your children? Swami remarked that the mother and the father create the physical vehicle for the soul to express its destiny. But the mother and father do not create either the soul or its destiny. They just provide the body for us to be able to live through it. Now, if you think of what we can experience with our human minds and our human bodies as a symbol of what we are destined to experience in our divine selves when we awaken to that level of reality. So that's why it's so often used, and this is why when Jesus was trying to help the people of Israel that he incarnated to serve, to understand on a deeper level what their relationship with God was, at a time when the idea of God was a judge, and you had all these rules that you had to follow. And when you read the Bible with the New Testament with a human understanding that this really happened to real people, because of the years that I spent in close association with Swami Kriyananda, I understood, and also listening to him talk about the years he spent with Paramhansa Yogananda, with Master, I understand how the human and the divine interact, and how so many times with Swamiji, he participated with us in a most relaxed and natural way. I traveled with him often. He would gather us together for meetings and for group events. He would come and stay in the house where I lived sometimes for weeks at a time. So it got way past the sort of hovering in the background, just kind of waiting for a pronouncement to come. Swami remarked once about someone who needed to relax more in his presence, because he said they tended to just sit there waiting for him to say something profound, which he did not find relaxing for him. So you had to become at ease. But nonetheless, there was always this other vibration. And one of the things that was so extraordinary about being with Swamiji, which I personally loved, was you had to stay wide awake. You were not able to just kind of drift off into subconscious babbling. He was not rude as a rule. He was not stern, as a rule. But if you were listening, you would just sort of feel the withdrawal of his consciousness as he would wait for you to recover and kind of come back into a sensible vibration. But having lived through all of that, I was remembering, I was walking down the street, it was probably in Amsterdam, and we came to a store window, and it was women's clothes, and they were hideous. They were just really hideous. I don't want to blame Amsterdam, it might have been a different city, but the clothes were awful. And I remembered when Swamiji was walking with Nirmala once somewhere, and they walked by a window, and it had some hideous woman's dress in it, and Swami turned to Nirmala and said to her, "If you were a woman, would you wear that?" And she looked at it and says, "Well, sir, as it happens, I am a woman, but no, I wouldn't wear that dress." But it was sort of just, anyway, I was just thinking about that, because it was very easy. He was very easy, and he was very relaxed, but you never forgot. And if you ever forgot, something would remind you. So when I read about the life of Jesus and with his disciples and what he was trying to accomplish, it becomes somewhat stilted over time, and you hear these stories over and over again, and you lose track of the fact that he was just sitting at the table having dinner. He was out on the seashore, with the fishermen. Even when he resurrected at the place whose name I can't remember, but they have a little temple, and they have a rock, and they call the rock the table of the Lord, because this is after Jesus has died, and and he's standing on the shore, and he's frying fish on this rock where he's built a little fire. And his disciples are in the boats, and they see and they realize that it's Jesus. And then they come rushing, of course, to see him because he was crucified and they saw him die. And now he's there, and he's cooking breakfast, And even just that reality, he does come, lo, here I am, resurrected. Yes, he also does that. But he also comes back and cooks breakfast. It's just, there's no separation, really, between the divine and the human. And we make all these false categories. And the unifying reality, what allows us to cross that seeming gap between the human and the divine, is love. And this goes back to the virgins. 10 of them, or whatever how many were there, 20 or there 10? As many times as I've read this, I can't keep it straight. But there's some good ones and some ones who've missed the point. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, that's one of the sutras. It's one of the warnings on the spiritual path that you might miss the point. When I first read that, I said, sir, this is translated from ancient Sanskrit. So there's a phrase called missing the point. And he said, apparently, that there is, but missing the point, it's when you stop and think about it, it's so profound. And the fact that it sounds so casual is part of how we keep in touch with revelation, and instead of making it religion. It's like, friends, you might get a lot of the details right, but you might still miss the point. And that's what happens to the poor ones who have no devotion. They're carrying their lamps around. They're acting like they're devotees. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They have the right costume and the right props. But they don't have, within that, they don't have the oil, the reality of what actually illuminates the heart, what illuminates the mind, what illuminates the spirit, and really brings us that unity. And so what this parable is trying to tell us is, don't miss the point. Don't think just because you've got the form all together that you're actually doing what you should be doing. And this is where we come back to the mother and the father. And I was saying about Jesus. Jesus was there he was, I say with the Jews, but they were all Jews. And he was part of the Essene. There were three, historically, there were three groups. And there was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. And the Essenes were the element that was still in touch with the revelation of Judaism. Because it wasn't really Judaism, it was a corrupt priesthood that had taken the revelation of Judaism and made it into a religion. And in that religion, there was power for the people who implemented it, because they were the ones who decided whether or not God, the judge, was pleased with you if you followed all these hundreds of rules. So Jesus came and he said really simply, God is our Father. He couldn't take it all the way to God is our mother. That waited for Master to come. But he could take it from the judge to the Father. If you ask of your Father a loaf of bread, will he give you a stone? Jesus says. And we all know. And then we have the parable of the prodigal son who goes off and squanders his father's inheritance and lives a dissolute, horrible life and is living, with the pigs as somebody's servant. And he remembers, I'm the son of a rich man. I don't have to be living in this despicable way. And with great embarrassment, he makes his way back to his father, hoping to just be given a room and a loaf of bread. And instead, his father opens his arms and celebrates the return, because deep in his heart, the child not only loved his father, but he remembered that his father had loved him. But he didn't trust that completely. He trusted enough to come back, but he didn't trust it as much as he should have until his Father showed him. You see, this is the only source of security in this world. It really is. It's that we are infinitely loved. We are the children of Divine Mother and Heavenly Father. Every one of our prayers, as Master taught them to us, how does it go? Heavenly Father, Divine Mother. I mean, there's two things that happen when we repeat something over and over again. One is we stop hearing it. And the other is each time it's said, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into our souls. And this is the foolish versus the wise. If we're just saying, well, this is what we say, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, and then after we finish the litany, then we kind of wake up and start thinking about the prayer. I remember this wonderful man, Narada. He passed away some years ago. He was the sweetest person and very shy and utterly devoted, perfectly named. And once he was hosting a program that I was giving at the little, it was the apprentice village at Ananda village. And he'd been given the responsibility. He was a support energy for that. But for some reason, he had to lead the prayer, or he was assigned to lead the prayer when I was going to speak at this class. And he got through the litany. He got through to the end. You know, saints of all religions, we bow to all of you. Then there's a very long silence. And then you hear him under his breath say, golly. He couldn't think of anything else to say. He was just stuck. And then gradually he managed to get a few words out, but it was so perfect. But honestly, there was more devotion in his golly than there is in a lot of very, very well-expressed prayers. Because it was just, he knew he was loved by God. And this is, if there's a single lesson that we should all learn. Yes, I mean, I love these teachings. I've just spent all this time every day just talking. Swamiji poured so much out to us that I have to it's like I have to keep it going just continuously. And I'll never catch up. I'll never catch up to what he gave us. And I love these teachings, and I get really excited about all the nuances of this and that. So it's entertaining, and it helps us, but the only reason, and this is how I've expressed it to people, when I'm given the slightest chance, I talk about karma, reincarnation, the chakras, and the yugas. Because if you can get the big four clear in your mind, then you can figure out pretty much everything else. And if you're shrinking from those realities, which if you're not familiar with them, I have a YouTube channel with hundreds of classes, and you can type into any of those words. There's lots of ways you can find out, and I encourage you to find out. But the only reason those ideas are helpful is because those ideas keep us from missing the point. And the point is, we can try as hard as we want to separate ourselves from our mother and our father's love. I mean, we can do the worst possible things. The parable of the prodigal son. We can just squander the inheritance and waste our life force in libertinism. We can do anything we want. We never cease to be loved by our father and our mother. And just what I was saying a moment ago, that is the only security this world can give. Because you see, no loss, no external loss, no external success, no insult or praise from anyone can ever have any effect on it. It can't change that essential relationship, because our soul was created by the divine. Our mother, physical mother and father love us so much for the body that they created. And the body just lasts a little time, then just turns into nothing. Whenever you've been with anyone where the soul has left the body which was so important, just becomes less than furniture. It becomes nothing, absolutely nothing. You're hovering around it before someone dies and taking such good care of it. The soul exits and it's nothing. But the soul that exited, that's where the life and the light is. And that's what the Divine Mother and the Heavenly Father created. We are a manifestation. Just like the mother feels that this child, is part of me, and there's this marvelous physiological stuff they're telling now about how literally the souls of the mother and the child, the cells of the mother and the child are all intermingled. Fascinating physiology you can read about. But it's a symbol. It's a symbol of who we really are. And the external, how we look to the world, success, failure, charming, obnoxious, whatever we are, loved, hated, it doesn't make any difference. There is another reality that we have to hold on to with everything we have, or else we're missing the point. And it doesn't matter how much we fail. Nothing can touch that love. We are entering into the beginning, of this wonderful season of the advent of the Avatar, the coming of the Christ. This is the season when there's like an opening in the fabric of Maya. The veil of delusion becomes thinner and the doorway becomes wide. Let us resolve, during these coming weeks, in one simple way, to receive, to allow ourselves to be loved, and to grow ever more deeply convinced that we are loved, infinitely loved, eternally loved, and who we are and what we do can never touch the power of that. God bless you.